This news update is brought to you by
Hello, this is Greg Stissel with Austin County News Online, and with Memorial Day weekend almost upon us, we and the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension of Austin County wanted to bring you a special Memorial Day weekend message. And to help us with that message, we are joined today by Jenny Carter and her son Sean. Jenny and Sean are part of the organization WhenSeanSpeaks.com, an organization dedicated to spreading the word that alcohol, automobiles, and asphalt don't mix. It's also just as important to be careful of whose car you get into as a passenger as it is if you're the driver. Sean and his mom have taken their message to tens of thousands of young people to help prevent drunk driving and to make people aware of the consequences of their choices. When Sean Speaks is a 501c3 nonprofit charity that was founded in 2010, and Sean and Jenny would love the opportunity to speak at your school, church, or event to help spread the word about making the right choices in life. Hello, Jenny and Sean. We're glad you could join us.
Hi, how are you?
Doing good. I guess the first thing we need to do is I'm going to basically turn it over to Sean. And Sean, I know that the introduction I gave of your organization was a good overview, but can you tell us your story so that others know why your organization was started?
I'm going to tell you a little about why I was asked to speak today. 15 years ago, I had the same dreams that many young people have. I wanted to graduate college and create a life for myself. I planned to go on to law school, and I had already been enrolled in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and had an agent in New York City. I wanted to eventually have a family, and the dreams went on. But in just seconds, my life changed forever. It was the Saturday night of Easter Sunday, March 2005. I was attending college at Midwestern State University in Wichita Falls, Texas. I was 22 at that time, and like many newly legal drinking adults, I thought drinking was just something I did to have fun. Boy, how I wish I knew then what I know now. I had decided to go out with a couple of buddies. Knowing that I was planning on drinking, I didn't want to drive. We were all over 21, so it was legal for us to drink. Thing is, I didn't really think about my ride home. I just knew I wasn't driving. I never had that important conversation with the driver. Hey, you're the designated driver. You can't drink. Honestly, I don't know if we even knew the term designated driver back then. So, we went out to a couple of bars, and we must have had far more than a couple of drinks. I'm sure I was too drunk to be aware that the driver had way too much to have the responsibility of driving us home. On the way home, the driver lost control of his pickup truck, and when it spun and slammed into a tree exactly where I was sitting, my life was shattered forever, just like my body was back then. Many of the bones on the right side of my body, my leg, my arm, my pelvis, my covered bones, were fractured. I also suffered from numerous internal injuries. None of that mattered because I also sustained a very severe traumatic brain injury that left me totally not responsive. I was not considered out of coma for 39 days. When I emerged from coma, I became aware of the hell that I was trapped in. I could no longer speak, and I could only move my head and my left arm and index finger. I had a really ugly little contraption screwed into my hips to keep my pelvis stable so that it could heal. It used to scare me when I looked down on it, but I had no way to tell anyone. Recognizing all of the care I was going to require, my mom quit her job to care for me 24/7, 365. We honestly didn't know what the future would hold for us. But here I am today, remember, 15 years later, trapped in my body, still unable to talk and totally dependent upon this big walker, or my powered wheelchair to move around through my world. It has been a non-stop journey to recover what I lost. In 2007, I began sharing my story. Along with my mom, I speak to groups about the dangers of drunk driving and being the passenger with a drunk driver. Mom and I founded a nonprofit, When Sean Speaks. That funds our speaking, allowing me to earn a salary and give up my Social Security disability. And we have the opportunity to do things for other survivors of traumatic brain injury. We have now spoken at more than 600 venues and to more than 375,000 people. We have traveled as far away as Long Island, New York, and Seattle, Washington to speak. We have been on North Carolina and Mississippi speaking 2 different times. Looking back on what brought me to today, my outlook has totally changed. I want people to quit calling these catastrophic events accidents. It is not an accident that causes a person to drink and then get into their car to drive.
It's interesting. I'm going to move this in your cup. It sounded like it's rather. Okay.
Okay. Jenny, what was it like having to undergo this ordeal, and would you have ever dreamed that you'd be on the journey you are now with Sean?
Actually, no, I would never have dreamed that this would happen, that we would be where we are today. It was pretty grim back when Sean was first injured. As he told you, I had quit my job, and we didn't know what the future was going to hold. When Sean came home after 9 months in different rehabilitation centers for people with brain injury, he couldn't do anything. He couldn't even feed himself. So it was really, really grim.
Okay, I bet. I guess another thing I wanted to ask is, I understand that Sean's not paralyzed, that he has traumatic brain injury. Can you explain this to us?
Yeah, every time when people first meet him, because he can't really move a lot of his body, especially back in the old days when he couldn't move anything on his right side, they'd always assume that he was paralyzed, meaning he had a spinal cord injury. But Sean didn't have any injury at all to his spinal cord. Everything that Sean lives with now, all his deficits are due to a traumatic brain injury, a very severe traumatic brain injury. And this brain injury is called a severe diffuse axonal injury. And it happened not from anything hitting his head. Sean's head never hit a thing, but when that truck stopped, his head flew from side to side. And when it did, his brain rubbed up against the inside of his skull, and it caused an all-over brain injury. The young neurosurgeon that explained it to me told me that it was really the worst kind of brain injury there is. And we always like to clarify that because it was a brain injury, we feel like there's always hope. With a spinal cord injury, that spinal cord's severed, and that's kind of where you are for the rest of your life. So we always feel, even though it's been a long, slow road, there's always hope for improvement.
Okay. Well, that's, wow. What made you both decide to share Sean's story?
You want me to answer this one? Okay. You know, when you're sitting in a place of grief and sadness, the only thing you can really do to get out of that is think about others around you. And we just decided by sharing our story, it would help us focus on something outside of ourselves. If we could prevent what happened, to one other person in this world, then life was going to be better than what it was yesterday. And that's really what our motivation was in the beginning. It was just to try to make a difference with Sean's story.
Excellent. What are some of the surprising things you've learned about the impact that Sean has had upon others?
Well, we've gotten emails from kids months after we've seen them, sometimes even years after we've spoken to them. And they've told us that his story has really made a difference. One time we had been in West Texas, Texas, that's how the little town calls themselves, to differentiate from being out in the Panhandle. Anyway, we were in West Texas, and several years later, one of the students wrote to Sean and told him that his friends all called him Triple D, which meant Dylan Designated Driver. He had just become that for his community because of Sean's story. He decided that he was going to be the one that kept his classmates safe. That's pretty powerful. Another story we had was from a young girl who wrote to Sean, and she told him that she had actually gone to school that morning with the intent that evening of killing herself and committing suicide. But after she listened to Sean's story and just watched him through the whole presentation, she decided that she couldn't, one, do that to her family, and also she couldn't give up herself. And so that was another powerful message that we got from a student. And that's why we do this.
Excellent. How did you start speaking and sharing your story? I guess that's how that first start?
Well, there again, we were thinking about it, and all Sean had was the ability to communicate through his iPad. He didn't have any other skill for his future. It was just, I knew how full he was of this power of his words. And so we contacted Mothers Against Drunk Driving. At the time we were living in Dallas, we contacted them and asked them if we could speak. They have these meetings once a month in Dallas County called Victims Impact Panels, where people who have been impacted by drunk driving, they go and talk to first-time offenders of drunk driving. Well, in Dallas County, it happens to be that from 250 to 350 people a month have to go to this VIP, they call them. So we went the first time, and each person gets 15 minutes to talk. And everybody else, this was really sad. Their stories were really sad, but they were all talking about their loved one who had died. And Sean was a person, a young man, that was a nice-looking young man that could share his story, and they could put themselves in his shoes. It was like a reality check for those people. They came to us afterwards and told us how huge an impression he had made on them. And we did that for probably 3 or 4 months, maybe 5 months in a row, and then they asked us to go speak at a school, a high school, and we went to that high school and we did our message, and the Dallas Morning News happened to cover our being there, and they put Sean's story on the front page of the Dallas Morning News. And it just kind of went from there. They also did a video, and people saw it and started reaching out to us, and that's what gave us our start. Kind of a long story for your question. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. The next one I was going to ask is, what brought about your relationship with the Texas Department of Transportation?
That again is, and I'm sorry I'm talking, it's just quick and it's easier than Sean answering this, so I'm going to answer. But
fine.
All of these things have been serendipitous. We really feel like God has been with us, and we TxDOT had an advertising company that was Googling, searching on the internet for a person who had been impacted by a drunk driving experience, and they came across our story on our website, and they reached out to us. And we went down, and Sean shared his story. We came to Austin, or went to Austin, and Sean shared his story, and they decided to feature him on a website that they have called Faces of Drunk Driving. At the time, there was only one other face of drunk driving, and Sean was the second one, and that kind of is how it's all started. They would reach out to us and ask us to go places and speak and for them. And then one day, we actually had gone to an event. It might have been a press conference in Austin, I can't remember. But we started talking, and we'd heard about these grants they give out annually. And we were talking to the director of operations about, hey, maybe we should apply for the grant. And it was a pretty lofty goal. Our little nonprofit is very small, and to get a grant, a statewide grant, would be a really huge deal. Well, he encouraged us to go ahead and apply, so we did, and it was really hard. And we happened to meet a woman. She's now passed away, but her name was Laura Dean Mooney. And sorry, she meant a lot to both of us. She meant a lot to a lot of people, but Laura, at one time, was the national president of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and she, by this time, was working for Watch Your Back herself for Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, and she toured the state and tried to prevent drunk driving. Anyway, we were trying to fill out our paperwork, and we didn't know what to do, so we called Laura and asked her if she would consider helping us, and she said, well, how about if I let you talk to, she set up a meeting with her boss, and that's kind of how it all happened. We applied, and TxDOT gave us the grant, but they said, hey, wouldn't it be better if you partnered with Texas A&M AgriLife? And wow, yeah, that's so prestigious to think that they would, offer us that possibility. So we did, and that was in 2013. And the rest of it's kind of been history. It's an annual grant that's awarded once a year, and luckily each year they want to continue the partnership, and TxDOT continues to fund the grant. So that's how that all started. It's a pretty long story, isn't it?
No, I think it's a very interesting story. I know Sean earlier in his initial presentation he stated, but again for the audience, how many miles have you traveled, and how many people do you think you've spoken to or in front of?
Okay, I'm going to just tell you that he had the number of people, but I just did last year's mileage, like 2019's annual mileage.
Right.
It was 26,750 miles in the state of Texas.
Wow.
That's a lot of driving.
That's a lot.
We stayed over 2 months in hotel rooms.
Wow.
You can think of that.
Yeah. I guess I've got to ask, I'm going to go a little off script on this one, but isn't that awful hard to transport all that equipment and everything? Is it just the two of y'all?
It's just the two of us. Yeah, and of course, Sean always likes to remind me that I'm getting older, and the miles are getting harder. It's harder to go in some respects. And in other respects, we realize we can probably do more than we thought. Oh, Sean's going to say something.
Go ahead.
Mama Pack Mule.
Mama Pack Mule. That's me. Yeah.
You better watch yourself, Sean.
Do you know what's funny? When we started out traveling, you know the luggage carriers that you pack your suitcases on to take into a hotel room?
Yes.
Well, it used to take 3 loaded luggage suitcases to carry what we needed into hotel rooms. Now we have it down to one suitcase, well, one major suitcase, and then there's about 3 other ancillary suitcases and things that we take in. And then we have all our stuff that we use when we speak, but I don't have to move that into the hotel room at night, so that's a little easier. We really like it when we're able to speak kind of what we consider locally 3 hours or less, because we can make it there without having to spend the night and then get back home. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's well, the practice makes perfect, I guess, right?
Yeah, you get better and better at it. It's probably what contributed to my knee problem, though, is all that carrying that I've done.
Very possible. Let me ask you, and this can be for either of you, if there was one thing you could tell other parents, what would it be?
Do you want to answer that, or do you want me to answer the parent one? I'm going to answer the parent one. I think the most important thing a parent can do is to continue to parent, to always be the one to tell their children, don't do these things. And I really think, and this is retrospective, I have the advantage of the rear view mirror that young parents are not going to have, or parents of teenagers aren't necessarily going to have, but I think you have to be an example for your children. I think you really have to walk the walk with them. You can't, well, even with drinking, but I mean, like even the cell phone, you can't sit and look at your cell phone when you're driving and have your child in the car who's soon to be driving themselves and then tell them they can't do it. You just can't be that kind of parent. You have to walk the walk. And I also think that it's real important that you talk all the time with your children. Don't talk at them, but talk with them about issues that bother them. Talk with them about the subject of drinking and driving, and kind of make a plan with them about what they should do if they're in a situation that they know is not safe. I think that's real important.
Okay. Sean, let me ask you, if there was one thing you could say to young people, what would that be?
He's got it. He just has to get there.
No problem.
Drinking may seem worth it for one night of fun, but that's all it is. One night.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both for your time and joining us today. Jenny, if someone wants to get in touch with you or your organization, what's the best way for them to do that?
If you go to our website, whenseanspeaks.com, that's probably the easiest way. There's a contact us on that. And that, on our website, on the contact us, it actually has my phone number, my cell phone number, and email address. And then there's the website form that they can fill out. whenseanspeaks.com, all one word. And I'm hoping you'll put that up on the screen so that everybody can see that.
We sure will. We sure will.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you both, and thank you for the audience, too, for tuning into Austin County News Online. And we want everyone to have a safe and happy Memorial Day weekend. Thank you, too.